everyone, and welcome back to these series of videos on creating a dialogue in IDEAScripting. In this video, we're going to go in and I'll show you how to select a file using the dialogue. So to be able to use the file browser to select the file. So we've already created a variable for the file name, so that's good. So let's go back to our dialogue, and now we're going to go create the actual elements in the dialogue to do this. So I'm just going to get rid of these buttons that I created in the previous video because we no longer need those. So when I actually make an option to select the file, I use a couple of text files, a group box, and a button. So I'm just going to go in and just drag the static text over here. And this, I'm just going to say this will be called file. So this was just an indicator where the file should be. And generally, I usually start in the corner. So I usually leave 10 by 10. And the height, I usually need it to actually be 14, which is the default, and so on. And the width is a bit long, so I'm just going to make it a bit smaller. Next thing I want to do is I want to add in another static text, and this is what's going to hold the file name. Here I'm just going to leave it as text because this is going to be overwritten by the dialog function. But what I want to do is give it an ID. So this is how I'm going to access it from the dialog. I'll be able to do the ID. And since this holds a file name, I want to make this a bit longer. So how about I'm going to go left 50, the top 10, oops, top 10, and width, I'll give it what, 200? And so on. So this gives me a nice long box to hold the file name in there. Next thing I want to do is I want to add on a button here. So this button, whenever anybody selects this button, what will happen is it'll open up the File Explorer so they can select the file. So instead of button, I'm just going to use the 3 periods, which is the default in IDEA. Whenever you see like they want to do any of the browse for files, it's always the 3 buttons. And this is just a bit large. I'll change this for 10 and 10 and so on. And I'm just going to change this to button, call this button file select. Last thing I like to do is I like to use a group box. Oh, if you get this, sometimes it happens when you select something else, just ignore it. So here I've got the text. So usually what I do is I put what's called a group box around it. So visually it becomes more apparent what you're looking at. And probably the easiest way to do that is I'm just going to go in, I'm just going to run this. And now you see this is a blank. So it's the text, it's going to hold the file name, but you know, there's nothing there right now to indicate where the file name will be. Using the group box will allow me to do that. So I'll just hit cancel. Let's go back in, return to the demo. I'm going to do a group box. I'll create that. And this is just for highlighting, so I don't actually need a name. So I'm going to get rid of that name here. And now what I'll do is I'm just going to make it longer. So I usually make it a bit larger than the actual text box here. So usually I add on an extra 5 spaces or so around the edges. So here I'm going to do left 45 because I got this here starting at 50. And then for the top, actually I'll do width next. So the width is 200, so I'm going to make this 210. So give it 5 on each side. Height, so the height, this is 14. Actually, we can make this 15. So I'll make it, give it each side. So I'll make this 25. And then finally I'll put the top. And I'll put the top as 5. Let's see what that looks like. The top always seems to be a bit lower. So let's actually just go back in here. I'll just click on that. And I'm going to change the top to 3. Look at make it look better. So now if I go back in and run this again, we can see that now this actually looks fairly decent. So you got the file, you got the text. This will be overwritten by the file name, and you got a button to go in and force you to select the files. So let's just go back here. I'll just make this a bit closer and so on. And now let's go create the code. So first thing I want to do is, for this, is I want to add code for when I select this button. And I'm going to run, the actual, create the actual function first. I'll just call it select file. And many times when I'm looking for code, especially when I'm doing something from scratch, I'll go in and use the language browser, because I know pretty much what I need, but I don't always remember the syntax. So let's go open up the language browser. So in the language browser, I know, just because I've used this often enough, that there's an object called common dialogues, and one of them is accessing the File Explorer. So it plays the IDEA File Explorer window to let users select a database to open. And if we go down to the bottom here, we see the code. So we've already got the variable file name, so I don't need that again. And actually, I'm just going to do this as a string, because I'm not going to set the variable here. I'm just going to use this as a string. So anytime anybody uses this function, so we'll make it a reusable function, it's going to open up the file browser and return the name of the file selected. So I'm going to, so basically I'm doing this dim object is object, because this is what ends up the variable to hold the common dialogues. And also I could just go in here, and instead of rewriting it, I'll go set that. I usually set the object to nothing right away so I don't forget. And here I'm just going to grab the code, and I'm going to change the file name to select file. So now what will happen is every time I select this function, it'll go in, create a variable to hold the common dialogues. It'll open up the File Explorer. Then it will return the File Explorer to the name of the function, which then will return it to whatever was calling that function. Okay, so now we've set up that function. Let's create some code to go grab this file name. So if you remember, if we go in, we want this button. So we got the button's file select. So this is the ID. So I'm going to do another case here. Whoops. Case. So every time that somebody clicks on the button, it'll go in, check to see if the button was selected. If the button file select has been selected, then what I am going to do is I'm going to call that function. And I'm going to do that by saying sFileName is equal to select file. So easy enough. So then whatever I select in the file name, as a file name, it gets returned and placed in this variable. Now that that's done, we've got the button. Next thing I want to do is I want to populate this text. So I want to populate the text file name. And how I do that is I use the dialog text. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add on some code at the end of the display it to display the file name. So it's the very end. So what I'm going to do is if sFileName equal to nothing, then else, and if. So if it's not selected, then I want to put some text there. If it is selected, I want to put the name of the file. And how I do that is I'll do dialog text. So remember from the previous video, this is the dialog function that allows you to go in and change text within the dialog. And I'll go use that ID name, and then I'll enter in the text, which I was going to say, please select a file. And if the file name has been selected, I want to do the same thing. File name. So I want to show the file name. And let's go see what this looks like. So I'll just go save it. I'll go run. So that works. I click on the button that brings up the File Explorer, exactly what I want. I'm just going to grab an item and it's showing me that. But right now it's showing me the entire path and the file name. So usually I'd probably just want the file name here. I don't want all that path information. So how I get around that is I used to have this function to go in and get this all, and I recently realized that there's an easier way to do it. You may or may not realize that IDEAScript can access the functions in the equation editor. So all those at functions, they can be used in IDEAScript. Or I should say, not all of them. All of them pre-version 9 of IDEA can be used. For whatever reason, with version 9, the IDEA developers decided to not keep that functionality available. So any add functions created as of version 9 and 10 aren't accessible in IDEAScripting. I think that's too bad, but that's the way it was programmed. And how you access these functions is, instead of using the at, do the I, so I split. So if you remember, the I split allows you to split up a text based on certain parameters. In this instance, I want the I split, and I want to start it with nothing and end with the slash. But what I'm doing is I'm doing 1, 1. So the last comma 1 means I'm going from right to left. So I'm going from the area that only has the file name. So if I'm going from the other file name, so I'm going from left to right, so it starts with nothing, a blank, which is the end of it, and I'm grabbing everything up to the first slash in the path. So if I go run this again, I go select the file, now we only have the file name. So, and that'll be it for this video. Next video here, we're going to add on a few other features. We're going to add on the edit box, and also I'll add on the option for the drop down. And the drop down is really related to the file name. So, catch you in the next video. Thanks.